Hi, I'm Jacob with National Fleet Products, and today we're demonstrating the install process for a WM Systems Non-Swivel loading ramp in a Dodge Ram ProMaster. This video will apply to all versions of the Ram ProMaster, encompassing all wheelbases and roof heights. Today is video 2 in a 3-part series. The first video covered the installation of the mounting hardware into the vehicle. In this second video, we're going to cover the installation of the loading ramp. We're going to attach it to the mounting hardware and perform its necessary adjustments. There will be a third follow-up video, and that's going to cover the operation of the ramp, and then we'll take some measurements of the space that the ramp and the mounting hardware take up inside the cargo area. The hardware we're demonstrating today is part of our new no-drill hardware. It's awesome. With this design, no drilling into the vehicle's body is required. We're going to accomplish the install using just a couple simple tools. Right here you'll see a few that are going to be optional. You may or may not need these. You're going to want to first have a 7/16 socket and crescent wrench, as well as a 4mm Allen, either an Allen key or on a socket. For sure you're going to need a couple others here. We're going to want to have you have at least a 17mm wrench. You could have an adjustable crescent wrench if you didn't happen to have a 17. We're going to have a couple sockets. We're going to have a 9/16 and a 1/2 inch. You're going to want to have either a large flathead screwdriver or a pry bar of some kind. You're going to want to have a little bit of reach to it. And then lastly, you're going to want to have a 10mm crescent wrench. Ideally, you'd have 2 of these. If you only have one like I have today, we're going to use an adjustable crescent wrench. I'll show you how we can make that work. Lastly, you'll want to be sure to have your impact wrench. Using just these tools, we'll have the install completed in about 5 to 10 minutes. First, let's review the ramp. As you see here, this is a non-swivel loading ramp. It's the Light series from WM Systems. And today's unit is our smallest that we stock. It is 23.5 inches wide, free and clear. When deployed, it's 79 inches long, and it has an 880-pound capacity. You'll notice that the unit arrives fully assembled, and it's able to be stood up as so. And one of the great benefits and features of this new hardware we've just installed is it allows the ramp to easily be removed. So maybe you don't need the ramp that day. It can be taken out and stored, or potentially you could share this ramp between vehicles on an as-needed basis. And of course, when the ramp is removed, it can be stood up in your warehouse, out of the way, nice and safely, as you see here. The first thing we want to check is to make sure that we have our L brackets installed. That's this little bracket you'll see right here. And typically these are supplied. If for some reason it's not, or if you've ordered this after the fact, those L brackets will have to be attached. And that's where you're going to use the 7/16 wrench and socket. And that's why these are optional. You may not need these, or maybe the L bracket ends up being in the wrong position. That'll allow you to loosen it and reposition it. If you happen to be installing this, the thing you're going to want to keep an eye on is the distance and spacing that's required. This is slotted, so it is a little variable. And what you're going to want to know is if you were to take a tape measure and measure from the center hole here on the front brace to the slotted hole on your L bracket, you're looking for a 7¼ inch center-to-center measurement to ensure that those positions line up with your slots here on the mounting hardware. Okay, at this point, we're going to have the ramp lifted up and into position. You may need a second hand to do that. This one's pretty light, but some of them do get heavy. And one of the neat things is we have slotted this to accept carriage bolts with our new hardware, which allows the ramp to be placed anywhere across the rear threshold. And what I'm going to show you today is if we were to mount the ramp as far over on the driver's side as possible, it actually allows the ramp to somewhat hide behind the door here and allow unfettered access through the passenger side door. We can begin installing the ramp. It just takes the 4 bolts that you've been provided. They are specific. They only fit in one way. The bolt that fits further in is towards the driver is going to be the larger bolt. That's going to be your 3/8. You can go ahead and slide that one right into the slot here. The bolt that's going to be more towards the rear is your smaller one. That's going to be your 5/16. And what I want to mention is during the hardware install, you may recall we had used our 4mm Allen key to tighten these 2 bolts. These may have sucked the plate down and maybe won't allow these carriage bolts to travel freely. You might need to take the pressure off these to allow that bolt to slide over easily. When adjusting the larger bolt here, sometimes that one wants to get stuck as well, and that might be where you'd like to have a larger pry bar. Insert here, go ahead and lift, take the pressure off, and slide your bolt over into position. If you go ahead and you get them roughly about where you want them placed, you can take your ramp, lift it, and now we've got the right side placed. Complete the identical set of steps on the driver's side. At this point, we have our ramp in, we have our carriage bolts placed. We like the positioning of the ramp, left to right. We can go ahead and take our washers, throw them on top of our bolts here. And you'll notice we have provided nylock nuts for the rearward bolts. But on the forward set, because they're carriage bolts and they might want to fight you if we supplied nylocks, we've supplied washers and then a lock washer to be installed on top of that, followed by a regular nut. Complete that on both sides. At this point, the nuts and lock washers are placed onto the bolts, and we're going to go ahead and tighten this down. If you were to grab a 9/16 socket, you can tighten the bolts that are further into the vehicle. And if you were to swap over to a 1/2-inch socket, you can tighten the ones that are closer to the rear. We're nearly done here on the attaching of the ramp to the hardware. The last step is to take that 4mm Allen key. If you had need to use it, go ahead and retighten up these two rearward most bolts. Now that the ramp has been installed, we'll begin the necessary adjustments. Good news, there's only 2 of them, and they're relatively quick and easy. The first thing to talk about here is the positioning options available. We've already discussed the left to right positioning, and now we're going to discuss the pitch adjustment. And so this ramp could, for example, be pitched towards the driver away from the rear door. This would be useful if you happen to be hanging stuff on your rear door. Maybe you have an insulation package and they've added some depth or volume to the doors, or potentially you just want to have the ramp leaned away from the rear door so it doesn't make any contact whatsoever. Alternatively, you might want to have the ramp leaned all the way towards the rear door. That's going to be useful if you happen to have maybe a shelving package you're working around, a van life build out that you're completing, or if you just want to maximize the cargo area inside the van. If you're going to be doing that, we do supply some rubber bumpers that can be placed on the door, right where this side rail is going to meet. That's going to provide a little bit of a bumper or a cushion type effect. We're going to apply those at the very end of the video, but I wanted you to understand how this is going to mount and your pitch is going to be affected during the adjustment process. If you happen to have mounted the ramp in here and you like it as is, the pitch adjustment is not mandatory. If you like it, leave it and go on to the next step. If you're going to be performing the adjustment solo, it might be easiest to deploy the ramp to gain access. If that's the situation, I'll have you lift the passenger side lock arm here. If it's stuck, you're going to want to take the pressure off it by putting a little forward pressure on the ramp to lift. And then come over here and depress this rubber plunger on the passenger side. That unlocks the 2 leaves. Go ahead and walk the ramp out. Now that the ramp has been deployed, these rubber bumpers on both sides are easily accessible and exposed. You're going to want to grab your 17mm wrench. And the nut that's right here is going to be your locking nut. If you were to take that and break the pressure off it, spin that nut down a little bit and maybe approximately count the threads that you're exposing because you want to even it out on both sides. So I've got 3 or 4 threads here. Go ahead and thread that rubber bumper in. And proceed to do the same thing on the driver's side here. Thread the bumper in. And now we can fold the ramp up and check how the pitch has changed. In this case, because we threaded the rubber bumper in, it has increased the pitch and now it's leaning closer to the driver. If you like the pitch and everything's good, you can go ahead and tighten it down. If you'd like to fiddle with it a little more, or maybe you think that you don't quite have these rubber bumpers aligned or in alignment, you can easily adjust this without deploying the ramp now. If you were just to pull the ramp forward a little, you can grab right here, come down, and you can do that micro adjustment as needed. Again, once you've identified the correct pitch and you're happy with it, simply take your 17mm wrench, come down here to this locking nut, and tighten her up. Our last adjustment is going to be possibly the most important. This is going to be required to at least be checked, but probably adjusted on every single installation. And it's going to be this passenger locking arm that I originally had you lift to release the ramp. This is what controls the movement forward and back in the ramp. And I can show you right here what's loose. Again, we've adjusted the ramp forward, and now there's extra play in the lock here. So for example, even though I have this locked, the ramp is able to move this much inside the vehicle. Going down the road, that would allow the ramp to bang around and maybe even make contact with the door. So this limit has to be adjusted and tightened up to keep the ramp from making that excess movement and isolate it from having that noise. It's relatively easily done. You're going to want to grab your set of 10mm wrenches. If you had a 10mm socket, that might even help. What you're going to do is come around here to the back side of it. There's 2 bolts that hold this locking arm down. What you're going to do is you're going to loosen the forwardmost bolt, get the nut out of there, take the bolt off. That'll allow you to get your 10mm crescent wrench all the way under the foot to the forward bolt position, loosen that one, and then we're going to make placement for this locking arm, and I'll show you how that looks next. At this point, we're going to begin to adjust our locking arm. The first thing to do is to get our 10mm wrenches here. We're going to remove the bolt that's closest to the driver first. I'm going to use a 10mm socket to speed it up. And all you need to do is take your 10mm crescent wrench, put that onto the nut, and remove this entirely. We have a bolt, a washer, and a nylock nut now. The next step, we're going to take that same 10mm crescent wrench, fish that under, and hook it onto the bolt that's closer to the rear here. And at this point, it's as easiest performed with a ratcheting 10mm crescent wrench. We're going to go ahead and loosen this up. Just needs to be loosened slightly. And now you'll notice the locking arm is free to travel in its slot here. And if we were to lock the locking arm onto the ramp, onto the post that's here, and slide it back so that we know that this locking arm is making good contact with the post, now we can begin to tighten things up. So we go ahead, we put our 10mm crescent back on there, and our ratcheting 10mm wrench. And then we reassemble the rear bolt here. When locked, this finger is actually blocking, so what you might need to do is grab the ramp, pull it towards you, take a little of the pressure off the arm, lift it up, and now you'll have easy access to, again, get that socket on there and tighten things down. Now that we have adjusted our passenger side lock and tightened these 2 bolts up that hold it on, I wanted to show you the improvement. Of course, it's now been locked here. And if you were to go ahead and put some movement into the ramp, you'll notice this will not move very much at all. It'll make it very quiet for the operator when they drive down the road. If for some reason you were having trouble getting perfect placement on this locking arm, there is an alternative. What you could do is go ahead and lift the arm, bring the ramp forward to take pressure off those rubber bumpers, break that 17mm nut loose again, and do that micro adjustment via the threads that are on this rubber bumper. That is more if you're having trouble dialing it in and getting that nice tight fit to the stud here like we're having. But once you're done, if you like it, the last step is to grab the foam blocks that have been provided. They're not very necessary in this application because we've pitched the ramp away from the door, but if you'd pitched the ramp towards the door and had it coming nearly in contact, what I'd tell you to do is shut the door and peel the self-adhesive tape off the back and place that right onto the body where the side rail would be making contact with the door. Congratulations! We have completed the ramp install in the Dodge Ram ProMaster. At this point, everything's been done and this is ready to go. However, there is a third video. In that video, we're going to discuss the operation of the ramp, how to use it, as well as we'll take the measurements of how much space the ramp takes up inside the van. We'll do some measurements of how far it is off the door. We'll measure the mounting plate and show you how much space that takes up in the cargo area. So please go ahead and watch the third video after this one if that's of interest to you. And at this point, I'd like to remind you that I am Jacob with National Fleet Products. We're here to discuss any questions you might have. Please give us a call to discuss your unique loading needs. Our number is 763-762-3451. Thanks for watching.